Hello, my name is Naren Sangvi. I'm with Sonaker Medical, and also I'm working with Focus Ultrasound Foundation. Today I'm participating in technology gaps and breakthrough panels, and I'll be talking about ultrasound-guided HIFU applications, mainly, as all of you know, for prostate. It's been used for the BPH and prostate cancer throughout the world. Also, clinical trials ongoing for the liver treatment, pancreatic cancer, breast cancer, bone cancers, etc. So, ultrasound-guided systems and the challenges, what I like to share with you is the difficulties that what we are experiencing are in the areas of learning time. These are new therapeutic modalities. These are novel and advanced systems. So it requires fairly good learning curve and requires good experience. When we talked about users, they require operator training. Because these are new systems, there are no residence programs in medical schools. Therefore, these systems are used by the new users who need tremendous assistance from the manufacturing or the commercialized devices. The other technical aspect of using ultrasound-guided focused surgery is related with the view angle. As we all know, ultrasound offers only limited view, and it's not like 360 degrees view of organ provided by MRI or the CT scan. Therefore, it's very important for people to know what they're looking at. For thermal ablation, ultrasound-guided systems do not provide absolute temperature mapping, and that makes it very difficult for some users to know what the treatment is doing or when the treatment is being applied. The major drawback of all focused ultrasound systems relates with acoustic coupling, or what we call the acoustic window. Primarily, if we are going through the skin, there is a situation because of the air trapped could cause skin burn, as well as hair could cause some problems. So these are the major drawbacks. However, there are a number of advantages of using ultrasound-guided systems that are listed over here, and everybody knows what I'm talking about. So what's the breakthrough? What I like to share with you is the more recent experience I had in attending a focal 2020 virtual meeting for the prostate cancer. What I found is that there is a transforming aspect of radical surgery to focal treatment for early detected prostate cancer. And it is well established that with the focal treatment reduces the morbidity, hospitalization, and cost. So this has become extremely attractive aspect in the treatment of prostate cancer using HIFU for focal treatment. Thank you.
My name is Tanya Kuklova. I am from the University of Washington, and I will cover technology gaps and breakthroughs in histotripsy, focused ultrasound transducer design, and treatment simulation that happened in the past 2 or 3 years. I'll start with histotripsy, and among clinical breakthroughs, there have been 2 first-in-human clinical trials of histotripsy for 2 different applications. One was done with a device built by Histosonics for liver tumor ablation in Barcelona, in Spain, and 8 patients were treated with no adverse effects and followed for 2 months thereafter. And the other one was for aortic valve stenosis softening performed by device from CardioWave in France and Netherlands. They treated 10 patients. Again, no adverse effects and improvement in symptoms in all patients. And interestingly, in that trial, some of the treatments were performed in fully awake patients. Further, in preclinical studies of tumor ablation, important progress has been made towards evaluation of anti-tumor immune response. Multiple groups have performed a number of studies of histotrypsy ablation in different malignancies using varying histotrypsy approaches, and determined that anti-tumor immune response is beneficial following histotrypsy ablation, as well as it's synergistic with immunotherapies. Further, in applications other than tumor ablation, successful large animal trials have been performed, in particular in thrombolysis for deep vein thrombosis treatment of intracerebral hemorrhage, and abscess disinfection, among others. In a slightly different direction, feasibility of histotrypsy with miniature transducers has also been demonstrated just recently. In particular, boiling histotrypsy of prostate was shown to be feasible, demonstrated in a canine model. Histotrypsy still faces some challenges in terms of clinical acceptance. Concerns are still being voiced about tumor dissemination after tumor ablation or embolization of clot debris in thrombolysis applications. In terms of imaging guidance, qualitative imaging guidance is great, ultrasound imaging guidance. However, quantitative real-time feedback on completeness of ablation is still something that several groups are working on, and it's getting closer, but still not there. The respiratory and cardiac motion do affect the precision of the treatment, and that's shared with our other HIFU ablation techniques, and so that necessitates motion tracking or gating. As well, beam aberration is by soft tissues, in particular fat, or bones, particularly in case of brain treatments, are important in terms of treatment precision and required output power, and strategies to mitigate that are still being developed. So in terms of transducer design, the largest shift that was seen in the recent years was the shift from classical spherically focused circular transducers with an opening in the middle for ultrasound imaging guidance to asymmetric transducers to better align the ultrasound imaging plane and the therapeutic beam. A good example of that is the clinical device by Histosonics that is asymmetric. Further, miniature transducers have recently been built for clinical and preclinical purposes. They are application specific, for example, transurethral ablation or transrectal ablation of the prostate. Furthermore, dual use arrays for both therapy and imaging have started to pop up. In particular, that's relevant for something like drug delivery applications where imaging-like probes can be used. As for transducer array design, the biggest progress there has been in the shape and arrangement of the array elements. In particular, in the past, random arrays with circular elements was used. And in order to maximize the filling factor of the array, recently spiral non-periodic arrays with circular or polygonal elements were proposed, and they helped in terms of that helped with filling factor. But recently, almost fully populated array with random polygonal shaped elements with equal surface area has been proposed and is currently being built. In terms of treatment simulation, there has been significant progress in that multiple open access HIFU simulation software packages have become available. In particular, there's HI2 simulator developed at FDA, K-Wave developed at University College London, HIFU beam from Moscow State University, and Cranion, developed at Focused Ultrasound Foundation. They all, some of them allow to model focused ultrasound field only. Some of them allow to also model tissue heating. And they have varying limitations in terms of allowed transducer geometry or tissue geometry, or how nonlinear of a field can they model. So they've been extremely helpful in research in developing transducer design and treatment approaches. However, real-time patient-specific treatment planning simulators are still a thing of the future. The other challenges treatment simulation faces are uncertainties in acoustic properties of tissues that serve as input for simulations. In particular, those are speed of sound, attenuation, nonlinearity parameter, as well as thermal parameters of tissues. And some of them can be deduced from CT scans and can be made patient-specific, but not all. There's further no widely available ultrasound-specific tissue segmentation tool, like reconstructing tissues with different sound speed from CT scans. And there is, like I mentioned, no open source software as of yet that sort of has it all, that can simulate arbitrary transducers, arbitrary tissues, and with all output levels from completely linear to strongly nonlinear. And that's all. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank the Focus Ultrasound Foundation for inviting me to speak today about the use of MRI-controlled focus ultrasound using minimally invasive devices. It's an area in focus ultrasound that I've been involved in for a long time. And I'm Rajiv Chopra. I am an associate professor in the Department of Radiology at UT Southwestern Medical Center, which is in Dallas, Texas. Just a quick disclosure of my involvement with companies, past and present, within Focus Ultrasound and outside, Profound Medical, Plus Instruments, and Solenic Medical. So as a quick overview of today's brief presentation, I'm just going to highlight the technology as generally as I can with one example, and then I want to focus on some of the strengths and weaknesses of using minimally invasive devices for Focus Ultrasound, and also some of the challenges and opportunities with this technology. So I want to say right off the bat, there are a number of minimally invasive focused ultrasound and non-focused ultrasound MRI-guided devices for therapy. I'm going to show you an example using, you'd be using the transurethral ablation device manufactured by Profound, simply because it's the one I have slides for. But I will say that there are equivalent examples worth discussing and exploring with MR-guided laser ablation, MRI-guided cryo, transrectal HIFU in the MRI through Inside Tech. So there are many examples, but let's use this as an example today. I think it serves its purpose. So what is the general technology for an MRI-guided minimally invasive focus ultrasound procedure? Well, in the case of this particular technology, which is the transurethral ablation of the prostate, it involves disposable applicators, as you can see here on the right. In this case, one to go into the urethra to locate transducers at the prostate, and one to go in the rectum for cooling. So there's that's a unique piece of this technology, or all these technologies, which is a disposable device. The devices are inserted usually in the MRI room or adjacent to it, and then attached to some delivery system. In this case, there's a rotational motor that allows precise positioning and rotation of the device during treatment. There's some electronics, some matching circuits here. And this is inside the MRI. Outside the MRI, you have usually a very low, small footprint device that has, or system that has electronics and planning and monitoring. And this is typically true of the laser devices, I know, and also this particular technology. They don't take a lot of room in terms of installation and construction. They're low footprint. So some of the common features, these technologies tend to be compatible with multiple MR scanners. They're vendor agnostic because really the only connection they have with the MR scanner usually is to obtain images for planning as a DICOM node and maybe some real-time temperature transfer. So they're very amenable to being integrated into multiple scanner platforms, and that's been shown by the various manufacturers of these devices. The devices are disposable, and the system footprint is small, as I mentioned, and they're meant for simple integration into an existing diagnostic environment. So again, just highlighting the fact that they don't involve a high degree of construction or site planning. They're usually designed to go into an existing facility. The workflow is not that different from externally guided focus ultrasound as we're familiar with it, but there are some small differences. So what's similar is MRI is used at all stages of the treatment, as it is for all focus ultrasound procedures. What's different is these are typically performed under a deeper anesthesia or even general anesthesia, depending on the invasiveness of the device and where it goes. So that's typically a difference. But there's a phase of insertion of the device and MR-guided device positioning to get to the right location, treatment planning using imaging, then a image-controlled therapy delivery, and it's been shown, at least in this technology, that true imaging feedback for precise, temperature-controlled therapy is feasible. And then finally, confirmation of the ablation with imaging, which is typical for most focus ultrasound procedures. So really, there's not that many differences other than the maybe deeper level of anesthesia and the invasive. So the strengths of using minimally invasive devices for MRI-guided focus ultrasound. Well, first, I would say a strength is that it's an invasive device. And what I mean by that is by putting a device inside the body, you eliminate many of the challenges experienced with externally located devices such as near-field heating, acoustic windows. Many times by putting the device right into the region or close to the region we want to treat, those issues are no longer an issue. We've also observed in my research and others that by having the device located inside the target region, for the reasons I mentioned just now, that leads to faster treatments for bulk tissue ablation. So one can ablate or coagulate or heat many cc's of tissue per minute, and that does lead to faster treatment times. And that's also been observed, by the way, with lasers and other less complex devices that are not focused ultrasound. These systems tend to have a low capital cost, which is a strength when trying to propose them to a hospital or healthcare environment. And from the other side of the equation, in terms of a manufacturer, there's a recurring revenue because these are disposables. And so every patient has a revenue source associated with them. So that's an interesting strength of the technology. There's no sacrifice of treatment accuracy. We've seen that these devices produce millimeter precision in the body for heating and ablation. So that, I think, is not really a sacrifice if designed correctly. They're not locked to a single MR vendor, which is also a strength when it comes to trying to expand this to multiple platforms with MRI. And they can, maybe one of the most important ones, which is not obvious, and in fact was not even obvious to us until we started using them, is that they can be integrated directly into clinical MRI coils in many cases, again, if designed properly. And the importance of that is that now physicians using the procedure are seeing the exact same image quality they're used to diagnostically. We're not asking them to take a decade step back into sort of images with a body coil or substandard coil imaging. They're using, in the case of the prostate technology I described, 32 channel coils with sense, fully accelerated imaging, small, the spatial resolution they want. And so they really, the perception then is you're integrating something new into what they already do rather than having to sacrifice to get access to that. There are weaknesses worth mentioning. Again, a weakness is that it's an invasive device. You have to penetrate skin, go into body cavities. That can, bring challenges into an environment. In some cases, it's not a showstopper. In other cases, it may be. So that's just an inherent weakness of the whole concept. Also, I think it's fair to say that even the minimally invasive devices for focus ultrasound still are designed for specific anatomical locations. A prostate device versus a liver device versus a brain device will all look different and have different frequencies, different number of elements, different configurations, which is not that different from our externally focused devices. They also tend to gravitate towards that, but it also is a factor here. I don't think it will become a one-size-fits-all minimally invasive device, personally. And the requirement for the higher level of sedation and anesthesia is, a sacrifice that one has to make when moving into this into this type of paradigm. So to wrap up, what are some of the challenges and opportunities using minimally invasive devices for MR-guided FUS? Well, some of the challenges, many of which I would say have actually been overcome now, but are, when designing this technology, making sure one has a means to achieve accurate placement. You're putting a device in the body, you can't adjust it once it's in there or you don't want to. And you can adapt to some degree with the device using the focused ultrasound beams, but accurate placement is essential. Obtaining accurate thermometry around the device. It's been shown now with the prostate example I gave you that using the right materials and the right engineering approaches, one can get MR thermometry right up to the device. I think the current technology, it's a 6 millimeter radius around the center of the device. So a few millimeters and beyond, it's basically unaffected by the presence of the device. But that needs to be carefully designed for. And the requirements for sterility and anesthesia, will have an impact and need to be factored in and could limit the number of locations that would be able to use this. The opportunities, though, are worth pursuing this, in my opinion. Number one is the regulatory pathway. If I look at the broad spectrum of MRI-guided ablation devices, and that includes lasers and now this example here of prostate, the indications for use are very general: soft tissue ablation, prostate tissue ablation. They're not disease-specific, and that is a huge, I think, opportunity for using these devices and considering to use these devices. The business model, I highlighted it, right? Recurring revenue with disposables, low cost of investment on the part of academic centers or medical institutions. That business model is an opportunity. One I don't think we've exploited to the full degree in the field of focused ultrasound, and may attract and be important in attracting further investment from next level partners in the medical device sector. And finally, the ability to integrate with the latest diagnostic MR hardware. So not forcing the MR hardware to go back to adapt to the focused ultrasound, but just seamlessly integrating into that, I think, is a huge opportunity, especially when trying to convince physicians of using this. So I would encourage further development of minimally invasive FUS devices for MRI-controlled therapy, and I think there's still scope to find new applications, new anatomical sites, new diseases, and I think there's definitely the impact would be to take the field forward. So thank you very much.
Welcome to ProMedical. I'm George. You may call me George. I'm the founder of this company, and the CEO still survived. You know that a long time ago. For ProHIFU, we are the leading company by now within China for the non-invasive HIFU therapy. We have a long history. I start from maybe, I think, 17 years ago. And we start from renting other products to hospitals, and then we start to R&D our new products, our our own product. We have win all local or domestic honors for different kind of competitions and local awards. We have get all the standards, certifications, including CFDAs and also CE and KFDA and TFDA. You may see that we have over 100 systems installed especially in China, Korea, and Taiwan. We started Taiwan business just from last year. So we have about 18 units outside mainland China. We have a little bit longer product line, as you know. We have almost 3 HIFU treatment products as 208 now is well known, and 300 is a robotic system we just launched, and we have another 308 will launch soon. We have 2 small products as a UT1000 and Pro 5G. You'll see this is our traditional products and installed in many sites, including Taiwan and Korea. This is our new Pro 300 robotic HIFU system. It's movable systems. The first one that get the CFDA, and we have installed about 10 units in local China. And soon we will get the CE, maybe next year in March. These are our ongoing R&D products, and someone is still in the process to get the CFDA. This is basic technologies for our transducers. Actually, we manufactured our own transducers and amplifiers. And for the software side, we have developed our own TPS treatment planning system. This is a 3-year project and it just launched in this November. This system only installed in the high-end configuration systems within Pro 300 and the later launched 308. This technology is based on the dosage calculation with AI. So this is based on we call a data collection system. You know, in China, we have to collect all the treatment data real time to the inspiration bureaus. So we build up this system to collect every single treatment in every installation site. By the cloud server, we can collect lots of data and do our AI things. Maybe in someday future, we can push out treatment planning for the individual cases to the every on-site case. And you may see that we nowadays launched a remote operating system to help doctors to therapy patients on site. The senior doctors or the training doctors are on the remote side, and they can training the doctors through the remote system, especially for the COVID-19 or for the pandemic period. And also we launched consumer products within our cruising ablation technologies. This technology is to avoid skin damage, and we can deliver a much bigger power than before. And in the case that if you have T2 high level, high signal MR images patients, or you have very difficult patients to treat. So this cruising ablation technology only can deploy in the 300 with the consumer parts. This is a real-time demonstration to show that the transducers rotate a cruising ablation. And now we can launch the worldwide data from our cloud servers to show how many real cases is happening year-to-year base. You know, in China, we still can get a very strong clinical support teams within our company. This is not the doctors from hospitals. These are doctors in our company. We hired more than 12 doctors. The left lady is our medical director. He's within 15 years senior gynecologist. All these doctors, young or old, they are hired by our company to deliver clinical trainings. So you may see that why we can get further developed by within the our own doctors' help, we can do lots of things. The major training centers for our system is in a city called Dongguan Gynecology Hospital. It's very near our training centers. For 2 years, they have treated more than 1,000 patients. The data showed in the PPT is 937, but I know they have more than 1,000 patient training by now. For ProMedical, we have our own clinical guidelines. Each year, we will launch a new versions of the clinical guidelines. It's difficult, that still we get no guidelines from the doctor side. So we have to do our own clinical guidelines for doctors. So every year, by our clinical teams, we can launch year by year with different versions of the clinical guidelines for HIFU treatment, especially for the fibroids and adenomyosis or other indications for the gynecologist. So nowadays, we have treated lots of indications like fibroids, adenomyosis, CSPs, breast aggregator, like these 4 kind of indications. Most of the hospitals in China, they are doing clinically. These several slides, I will show you the real case that we have done in China hospital. Some of the hospital, they're using MI for the evaluations, but most of them will use fusion imaging by ultrasound to do the evaluation. This is by MI image. These are the ultrasound imaging. So in some cases, we need a very good ultrasound to do contrast images to see what's the outcome of the evaluation. For cases, other indications, actually we are doing lots of new indications in the field, but we're not showing you here. If you have any question, you can contact our institution. And thank you very much.
I don't think he was on the email thread or in the where the Zoom link was.
Thank you very much for attending this panel dedicated to technological gaps and the breakthroughs. So we have our different panelists here for responding to your questions. Just use the chat so I can transfer them your questions. So maybe I can start by a quick question to Kulavo and Ninen. I really first enjoyed your presentation, and I'd like you to develop a little bit on the concept of dose for bubble-mediated bioeffects. This is one of your challenge for the future you mentioned. Can you explain a little bit that?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. So it's a great question. So what we have been doing in the past is using the bubbles for blood-brain barrier opening. And there we have used MRI to monitor the effect, seeing that the blood-brain barrier is open, but we really do not know exactly how the opening is happening and how to control it and what are all the biological impacts that the bubbles have in tissue. The same is true when we are trying to use it for immunotherapy. And we don't know what's the dose. The thermal things, we know the thermal dose and the coagulation threshold, but for these bubble-mediated therapies, we do not know. There are lots of different things that we can do with the bubbles, and we can demonstrate them in animals, but then how do we control and measure the exposure in patients? And so that's the main issue there. In my mind, that still requires work. So some kind of bubble dose that tells us what the biological response is, and that might be different for different indications.
So can you give us an example, like of a matrix, for example, for the BBB opening? I mean, maybe I'm sure you thought about it.
Yeah. So no, it would be good to know during the sonications that how much opening you are getting, what size pores are you creating, or what size molecules, how many molecules are you getting into the tissue? But I don't think we can increase the permeability to a degree, but it's not highly controllable in the clinic yet. So.
Okay. Maybe the K-trans or K-trans, something like that would be helpful, or?
Yeah, it could be. if you could relate the physical measurement that we can obtain during the sonication to a K-trend, then that would be great. But then there are other things like you're stimulating inflammation and downstream effects. So what is the dose that correlates to that? Like we get similar acoustic signals coming back from different bubbles, but the bioeffects are not the same. So there is a huge opportunity looking different kind of bubbles and using them to stimulate different kind of effects in the brain. The same way, of course, when we try to stimulate neurons, for example, we don't even know what mechanism is there. So.
Okay, thank you, Kulavo. So I propose I ask a question to each one of you, so we have time for everybody to at least respond to one question. I still have no question on the chat, so let's ask question to Dennis. Dennis, in your presentation, you describe in details the different methods that were proposed for measuring temperature with the MRI. And my question would be like, and what's next? I mean, what should we do in order to go further with MRI for thermometry or for other application for monitoring the HIFU treatment?
Oh, well, that's a great question, which I didn't really touch on as far as the talk, but I think for just monitoring what's going on for ablative procedures, our goal is to do very rapid three-dimensional temperature measurements, and that was the one thing that I was trying to allude to, is that we are hoping that the combination of T1 and the proton resonance frequencies simultaneously would allow us to detect when tissue changes are occurring dynamically. And so for ablative procedures, I'm hopeful that that's going to be a useful additive measure. But for the many other procedures, for BBB opening and neurostimulation, and those that require non-thermal effects, I think it's going to be a challenge for MRI, and I think that's where those, Tanya and Clairvaux and others we're working on ultrasound-guided methods, may have some advantages right now, and I think it will be interesting to get comments from them as far as what are the monitoring methods that they envision will work for BBB opening and neurostimulation. I could imagine a very low temperature heating in the MRI scanner, and that way you could see where the focal spot is, and then you could go to a non-thermal method, or maybe RFI, we could use radiation force imaging. But anyway, those are comments possible.
And how we far from performing like temperature measurements in 3D in MRI?
Well, we have it working. There's at least 3 or 4 of us working on it. Will Grissom at Vanderbilt and Craig Meyer at UVA, Parnas. And we have methods that work quite well. The challenge is to use them dynamically in a commercial system. Insightec is FDA approved for a single slice measurement, and we're able to take our 3D image and then pass a single slice to them, and in that manner we can do it, but it seems counterproductive. So the goal is to get these companies that are doing thermal ablation to build a system and get it FDA approved with one of our 3D techniques.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Naren, you have been a great advocate for defending ultrasound for guiding treatment in your presentation. Well, and also when you have your great expertise for treating prostate cancer. What do we need? I mean, we well, at least all of us around this table know that HIFU is very efficient for prostate cancer, but for treating prostate cancer. But what do we need to replace conventional methods like robotic surgery or radiotherapy with HIFU?
Very, very nice, nicely put this question, because I have been in the field working with lots of clinicians now since the introduction of the sonoblade device. And what you find is the majority of the people do not know how ultrasound works in terms of the therapeutic aspect. Majority of the people know how to use for the diagnostic purpose. So there has been a very large gap between the teaching in terms of the diagnostic moving to the therapeutics. However, I will say that yesterday I attended, or day before yesterday, I attended one of the live presentation, and I was very pleased that one of the residents from IU Medical School has moved to Arizona now, and he's practicing HIFU. So slowly but surely, medical schools adaptation has to take place where the burden does not fall on the researchers, because researchers will not be able to teach these devices to the medical practitioners. So what we will have to do is make the devices easier for them to use it, because like all the success is what you know in the field of medicine is saying, how can I make use of it so it benefits the patients? They don't have lots of time to understand all the physics and things that goes behind it. So we have to make it the tool that is easy for them to adopt.
Yeah, that's very important. Yep, go ahead. Sorry.
So I think the other thing is the cost. The cost plays a major role in terms of the adaptation. And the third thing really is, how do the doctors benefit from this procedure as well? We as the scientists have been very good at saying doing good and things like that, but at the end of the day, it is the business. And the doctors have to survive this. So therefore, the commercialization has to come up in parallel with the research. Otherwise, this thing will just stay in the laboratories.
Okay, I see your point. So we should improve the education of people, make sure we provide cheaper device and easy to use. Okay, that's a nice strategy. Thank you, Naren. The next question will be asked to Tanya. Tanya, I know you have a family tradition of numerical modeling. So I was very interested by your slides, where you believe that we still need some methods for numerical modeling in real time. And on the other hand, you say that tissue properties is changing with treatment. So how do you think it's possible to model treatment in real time, and for what purpose?
So I do stand by my statement that it is important to model the field in real time. What I meant by uncertainties in tissue properties is not necessarily the changes they undergo as you treat. It's the intervening tissues that you don't mean to damage are usually the problem, such as the bone or fat or gas, what have you, ribs, in the field. So being able to predict accurately what your acoustic field will be and your temperature field will be before any changes occur, that in and of itself, I think, is already very important. And if it could be made patient-specific from a recent CT scan or a real-time CT scan even, that would be, I think, an enabling tool for doctors to use, especially if it was made user-friendly, like Naren is suggesting, such that you push a button and you're told, okay, you're best off if you position the transducer this way, if you turn off these elements, and then you know exactly what you're doing and exactly where you're doing it.
So you focus your talk a lot on isotropy, quite normal. you know that there are two sorts of histotripsy. So depending
There's actually more.
Yeah, well, let's keep it simple. I know only two, let's say like this. Which one would you favor depending on the application?
So I think in terms of, they all offer their own benefits. So for example, the cavitation histotripsy or microtripsy as it's currently primarily used is, I think, the best bet for transcranial applications because it favors lower F numbers of very focused transducers that assume there's access from all sides to the treatment area, and you can make it low frequency, which cavitation histotripsy really benefits from. For the boiling histotripsy, I think the best sort of niche is miniature or limited acoustic access applications such as transluminal or transabdominal, where acoustic access is a problem, such as pancreas, for instance, or a prostate in terms of transluminal.
Great response, thank you. Rajiv, thank you also for advocating this interstitial transducer. You know I'm a fan. Well, each time we have been working on this design of these devices, everybody was saying that, okay, we can do the same thing with RF. Can you confirm, and why should we still work on these interstitial devices?
Well, can you hear me? I would actually say that there are probably applications where a simple device like RF is adequate. What I have seen is what we can do with ultrasound is really get high precision, especially if we couple it with good image guidance. And so in those applications where high spatial precision, accurate thermal dosimetry is necessary, then there's no question that ultrasound will offer huge advantages. In an application where just simple bulk ablation is required, I think it's a fair question because there's a lot of overhead that comes along with our technology that it has to add value. So I would say it just depends on the application. I can speak to the prostate where, millimeter precision is really important. There's no question in that application. There is no match for using focused ultrasound.
Thanks. I have a question from Stephen Allen, and feel free, all of you, to respond. Stephen is asking if anybody has an experience or explored PET or SPEC to monitor BBB opening, and is this feasible? Kulavo, maybe, or?
I didn't hear the question. What was?
Well, Stephen is asking if instead of MRI, you could use PET or like a CT to monitor BBB opening, and would this be interesting? What benefit of that?
Yeah, no, we have done some PET imaging for after using a tracer, and it is useful. You can quantify the amount of molecules getting into the brain. The spatial resolution is not that high, but it could be used. CT we haven't tried, but in principle, yeah, you should be able to use it, but it has the ionizing radiation, so that might be a problem. At least doing lots of monitoring, but maybe just verifying at the end might be okay.
I have a quick question for you, Kulavo, while you're there. You said in your conclusion that one of the technical challenge was to design high frequency to the array. So what is the upper limit you're reaching, and for which application you think that would make sense to develop such arrays? Yeah,
so that statement was for thermal ablation with high powers. So with the lower powers like blood-brain barrier opening, bubble enhanced, you can go to high density arrays because you don't need much power. So I think at the moment with the technology we have, we are at about 750 kilohertz. And then after that, it's much more difficult to make those arrays the way we are making them.
Okay. Well, time is running fast, so we have 2 more minutes. So one general question, and you have like each of us 20 seconds to respond. It's from Frederick Padilla. So what do you think will be the treatment in the next 5 years that will lead to applications will lead to treatment of most patients? That's a bet. And I ask again the question in 5 years. I'll check your responses. So go ahead. What do you think will treat a lot of patients in the next 5 years? Bravo, come on, brain.
You asking that for me?
Yeah, well, for all of you.
Oh, I mean, the blood-brain barrier thing is going to be very, very widely used. So there will be lots of patients do that in different applications, cancer patients first, and then dementia, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's to start with. So.
Well, prostate is another obvious one for both BPH and cancer, I assume.
Yeah, okay. I suspect, Naren, you confirm?
I totally agree, because I don't think this should be a question anymore.
Yeah.
Hundreds of thousands of patients have been treated. And one of the breakthroughs I think the HIFU really achieved is in the prostate, because now we are going to get rid of the radiation and radical prostatectomy.
Great. Okay. Dennis, Rajiv, maybe?
I was going to say that neurostimulation and the immune response are the things that seem most intriguing that I know the least about.
Okay. And the last word for you, Rajiv, maybe?
Okay.
I concur with Naren. I think prostate is it's just the numbers. The numbers tell the story.
All right. Thank you all for attending this panel.
I think we are biased.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
Thank you all for attending this panel, and thank you for your presentation.
Nice meeting you guys.
Thanks.